Welcome to another video from SkiBoatPartsOnline.com, where our passion is keeping older ski boats on the water. We produce these videos to help you, our customer. Welcome back to another video from SkiBoatPartsOnline.com. My name is Ron, and today we're going to take a look at basic ski boat winterizing. What I've got behind me here is a traditional direct drive older inboard ski boat with a typical V8 motor in it. So we're going to go through that. Now, if you have a V-drive, you will probably have some additional hoses that have to be drained that are for your transmission. A lot of the V-drive transmissions have water cooling built into them. If you have a heater in your boat, there's some additional plumbing and hoses that need to be drained for the heater. Now, if you still have an operating medallion instrument system from 1998 through say 2004, 2005, that has the MDC with the speedometer hoses connected to it, remember to remove those hoses from the MDC to prevent freeze damage from that. So let's get started. The tools that you're going to need are very basic for this job. 5/16 nut driver is going to be really handy to have. You can use a flat drive screwdriver, but mostly it's for hose clamps. Now this is a unique tool. You can pick these up. This came from Harbor Freight. It's it looks like a pick tool that ran into a vise that really twisted it up bad, but this is actually a hose removing tool. It's got unique bends to it that you can, once you loosen your hose clamp, you can get this in there and help pull a stubborn hose off. Handy tool to have. Half-inch drive ratchet. A lot of the older ski boats have a half-inch female square plug in the exhaust manifold drains. So you'll need the half-inch drive ratchet to remove those plugs. There's a few other plugs that are out there, but that's a common one. Then I like to have a 1-quart Ziploc bag here. This is for putting all my plugs in. So in the springtime, I know I just grab this, I leave this on top of the motor, and I know where all my parts are. But the very first thing you need to do is you're going to have some stable. There may be some other brands out there that are being used, but this is the standby stable brand. There is a difference between the marine version and the standard automotive version. This is readily available. We also sell it. Looks like part number MEF0040. We'll put that on the video as well. The difference between the marine version stable and the automotive version is this is slightly more concentrated. They say up to twice as more concentrated as the automotive version. Why? Because our layup period is longer than the average auto or truck is laid up. So this is designed for at least a 6-month layup period. So this is what you're going to need. Now I also use some good old WD-40. When I'm all done, I will spray this all over the engine. That helps protect the engine and the paint. Keep it looking nice and fresh, and it'll have a little bit of odor when you start the motor up in the spring again. But it's not a big deal. I've used this and done this procedure for over 30 years, and I've never lost a motor. So we'll thank the Lord for that. So let's get started. We're going to start with the stable. The very first thing you want to do, probably start near the end of your skiing season. You don't know when the weather is going to turn, so start adding it. It's not going to hurt the motor to have it in there, but you want to have this in your tank. Now, here's a little tidbit of information. Carbureted motors and fuel-injected motors consume their fuel a little bit differently. If you add the chemical, this is a carbureted motor that's in this boat, so I need to add it in the tank early on because it takes a while for that fuel to get to the carburetor. It could take 20 minutes, 30 minutes, depending on the hose length, the amount of filters. It could take a while. So make sure you add this while you're still using the boat and still skiing. Now, fuel-injected motors, it's a little different. They have a fuel return line. So fuel is circulating. Every time the engine is running, that fuel is circulating from the tank to the engine to the tank to the engine, going back and forth. So you can get away with bringing the boat out of the water and say, okay, this is the weekend we're going to winterize, so we're going to add our stable, we're going to be running the engine on a bucket, and we're going to run it for 10-15 minutes, and during that time you are circulating your stable. It doesn't work that way with the carbureted engine, so make sure on a carbureted motor you add this to the tank. Now down here in the south it's going to be 92 degrees outside today. It is middle of September, and we're not done using this boat. In fact, we're just starting our skiing season. But we're going to go through all the steps and procedures, and I'm going to add it to the tank. So you read the bottle, it will tell you 1 ounce per 10 gallons, and I know in this boat we've got roughly 10 gallons. I've got 4 ounces in this bottle. I'm just going to add a little in there till I'm down to 3 ounces, a little bit more. Now I've got down to 3. So we've added 1 ounce of stable to our tank. Put the cap back on and go use your boat. This is what you need to do. If it's a carbureted boat, you're going to need to go use it so that you're assured that you've got all of that chemical running through the system. So next thing to do is we're going to jump in the boat and start hunting down where the drain plugs are. We'll show you where those are. Okay, we're going to start by tracing the water flow in your boat. The through hull fitting on this boat is down below this muffler, and it comes up to the seawater strainer, comes through the seawater strainer and down to our transmission oil cooler. Now, if your seawater strainer is mounted with the bowl up, there's virtually nothing you need to do for winterizing because it's not going to hold water. If your strainer is mounted bowl down, you must remove this, drain the water out of it so this bowl does not crack. If it cracks, you'll need to call us and we'll get us send you a replacement bowl. So that's your seawater strainer. This one's clean, so I can see through it. We don't need to take it apart. But if it's clogged up, obviously take it out and clean it while you're doing the procedure. Then the water is going to flow down and goes through a trans cooler. The first thing we're going to do here is your exhaust manifold. The exhaust manifolds, water comes in the front and comes through the manifold, but it holds water. Here is a drain plug down here at the bottom. In most cases, you're going to have a 1/2 inch recessed hole. Take a 1/2 inch drive ratchet, loosen it up, and be prepared for water to come out. Now, if you've got a hot engine, be careful. This water is going to be warm. But in a second here, she's going to pour out, and I like to use my hand to shield that water from the carpet. Get it in the bilge. And then this plug will go in our bag, which I didn't bring in the boat. I'll have to go back out and get. So we'll set it up on top for right now. So this is done. Next is going to be the block drain, and I'll have to relocate the camera so you can see the block drain next. Okay, both your Ford and your Chevrolet V8s have a engine block drain fitting. Now on the Ford, on the port side, it's going to be all the way to the back of the block. On Chevrolets, they put them right in the middle on both sides. Ford, it's going to be toward the back. On the port, toward the front, we'll go to the other side in a minute, on the starboard side. So again, this drain plug, all you do is loosen it and let the water pee out. Now, if you have the original petcocks that are a stamped sheet metal style, they go bad, they spin, they get loose. We sell, this is the solid brass. In fact, this will come all the way out on the brass one. And all that water is peeing out of the block. I'll hold my hand there to keep it off the carpet. This is a solid brass petcock, much better. We'll put the part number for that. But just let that come out like that. Okay, now we're over to the starboard side, and we got our exhaust plug again, just like the port side. And get ready to hold your hand to direct that water to the bilge. And I did remember to get my bag now and put the parts in the baggie. Now again on the Ford, can we see way up front here? Again on the Chevrolets, the engine block drain is going to be the center of the block on both sides. Ford, on the port side, it's all the way to the back. On the starboard side, it's way up here. So we're going to go ahead and open that and just let it drain. Now, and this is going to be more on the Chevrolets, if you have a side block or port, the drain has a fitting with a wire coming out of it, a single wire. That is a knock sensor. You'll need to be careful with those. You kind of pinch the boot to remove the wire, and then take a socket or a wrench and turn that knock sensor out, and that is your drain. Word of caution, and the knock sensor is kind of delicate with the parts inside. Do not drop it. Make sure you treat it with some care. So that's both block drains, both manifold drains. Now we're going to go to the front of the engine. Okay, our raw water is coming from the back through the seawater strainer, through the transcooler, and this hose here is feeding the pump. Now if you have a belt drive pump on a PCM, it's the same thing, only it's a belt drive pump, not a direct drive pump. I'm going to loosen that clamp. See if we can't get this. Now you're going to want to take this hose and lay it down in the bilge. If the hose and the hose exit is all lower than the trans oil cooler, you don't need to fool with the trans oil cooler. All that water that's in the seawater strainer and trans oil cooler will drain all the way to the bilge out that hose. Then you can remove this hose, or what's even better is pull the front cover off the pump and pull the impeller out. That'll keep any water that's trapped in here from freezing. So I like to actually remove the impeller. Now these little brass screws are kind of hard to find. It's a new part we're stocking, replacement screws for these Johnson pumps. I guess we need to put that part number on the video too. And then I'm going to show you a trick on how I remove these impellers. This is all geared for the do-it-yourselfer with common tools. We're not going to use a extractor tool. And there's our impeller. Now you saw water is running out of there, and you'd probably be okay, but leaving it like this with no water in the pump. But I like to pull the impellers out and let them relax. Let those blades expand, because I've had more than one good impeller that has sat over the winter, and the blades, once you start it in the spring, they did not open up, and it's caused the pump to starve for water and kind of burn itself out in the matter of minutes. So one of the tricks to getting that out is to get some soap in there. It's just some plain old hand soap or liquid detergent. Get this thing to pump. Come on. There we go. We get some soap in there. It's going to stay off. And then just rotate the engine. You may want to come up here and take a look at this coil wire. We don't want it to start, so we're just going to pull the coil wire off. And now we're just going to crank the engine to move that soap around. Okay, we got some bubbles. Now you can take two screwdrivers, two small flathead screwdrivers. Let's see. Oh, I'm gonna have to answer the phone. And that's how we pull the impeller out. Okay, here's our collection of parts. I've got the impeller in the bag with the little impeller blades are just nice and relaxed and opened up. We got our two drain plugs from the exhaust manifold. Now let's go back down to the front. I'm going to just put the cover plate back on with screws loose so I don't lose them, and it'll keep that gasket nice and flat. Okay, and this is loose, so any water that would come out would still drip out the bottom. Next, I call this the J hose. This is the hose between our circulation pump and the manifold. This one can be a little bit tougher to remove, and this is when I usually end up using that hose extractor tool. This is going to trap water right in here. Yeah. Now this one's actually going to come loose. All you need to do is drain it out and leave it off just like that for the winter. Okay, we've got everything drained on the motor now. Our pump impeller has been removed. I get the question often about adding antifreeze into the engine. And I'll ask, well, how are you doing it? I said, well, I run the engine on a bucket, I put antifreeze in the bucket, and connect it up to the engine and let the engine draw the water in. Well, unfortunately, that is not a very good method. What happens is you draw water out of the bucket, or antifreeze, if you're going to put antifreeze in there, goes through the raw water pump and up to this thermostat manifold right here. And this thermostat housing has bypasses designed into it for the exhaust manifolds. So water is always going to be flowing through the exhaust manifolds. Now the object is to get antifreeze into the engine to protect the engine. But if our thermostat is closed, which 99 times out of 100 it's closed if you're running your boat on a trailer. When you're running it on a trailer, on a bucket, you're running cold tap water through the motor, and the motor has a hard time if it'll ever get warm enough to open the thermostat. So when you're drawing antifreeze or coolant out of a bucket through the engine, what you're doing is you're coating the raw water pump, which we drained, and you're sending it all out the exhaust. None of that coolant is going into the engine where you want it. Now, if you really want to add antifreeze to your engine, the way you'll have to do that is after you drain the block, put the drains back in, so now you have a dry block, pull the thermostat housing apart, remove the thermostat, pour your 50-50 antifreeze down into the engine. That will get the antifreeze into the engine. It's a lot of work for little benefit. A dry engine versus an antifreeze. Now the old antifreeze had rust inhibitors in it, and there was a level of protection from rust that you would get, but today's environmentally friendly antifreezes, I just don't see the rust inhibitors in there on the labels anymore. So in our shop, we simply drain them and winterize them dry. So the next steps coming up is going to be to loosen this alternator belt up, and then we're going to coat it with oil. You can actually take because we're going to loosen this belt up. I don't like leaving a belt stored for the winter under its normal tension. So we're actually going to relieve the tension from the belt. And yes, takes a couple more tools depending on which alternator you have. Okay, belt is loose, tension is off the belt. If you're going to do that with a belt drive raw water pump, just take the whole pump out of the boat. Keep it in a warm, dry area if you want to. So our J hose is drained, our pump impeller has been removed, our belt is loosened up, the block drains are out, The only thing left to do now is to spray this motor down with some WD-40, and we're good to go for the winter. Okay, all of our draining is done. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some WD-40 and we're just going to spray it all down. Okay, I think this one's ready for the winter. Here's our bag of parts. I like to just leave it sitting right there, right where I can find it. Okay, that just about completes the winterizing. What's left to do is to prop the motor box up. Put a little block of 2x4 or something underneath the motor box. You want everything to breathe as best as possible while the boat's in storage. The passenger seats, any compartments, leave them cracked open. You want to make sure that air gets in there. You want to fight mildew. There are some mildew absorbing things you can put in there, or moisture absorbing. These are all good practices to do. Now, some of you may be asking, what about the engine oil? Oil and oil filter. If you ask 10 different marine experts what to do, what kind of oil to use, and when to change it, you're going to get 10 different answers. But what has worked well for me for 30 plus years, I do a fresh engine oil change, oil and filter, in the springtime. That's part of my spring startup ritual. The fuel filters, the oil filters, any moisture, and again, my theory on that is if I do an oil change in the fall, if there's condensation that forms depending on how and where you store your boat, there are boats that I've seen that have tremendous condensation built up because of the heating cooling cycles, the sun on it, then it gets cold at night and the sun on it again the next day, and you can build up these temperature changes on a daily basis, which can lead to excessive condensation. So if you change the oil in the fall and you have all these condensation issues throughout the winter, come springtime you think you've got fresh oil in there, which you do, but you may also have a good bit of condensation or moisture. So on a car, that's not a real big deal because car engines run warmer, the oils run warmer, and they get to a point where they boil that moisture out. But on a typical ski boat, particularly the older ski boats, a lot of these old ski boats run with 140, 143 degree thermostats. So that engine oil never gets very warm, and consequently it doesn't burn that moisture out of the oil. So therefore, my theory is, and what's worked well for me, is I do my oil change in the springtime. So any condensation or buildup that has occurred and has gotten into the oil, I'm going to drain it all out and put fresh oil in. So that pretty much concludes this episode of the Basic Winterizing. I hope you enjoyed this episode. You know what to do. If you want to subscribe, click on the subscribe button. If you enjoyed this video, let us know. We'll keep making more of them. So hope your boat has a safe and good winter without freezing. Down here in the south, when football season starts, that's when our waterways are ready for skiing. So that's when we do ours. So we're actually going to de-winterize this boat quick so we can go out and have some fun with it. Thank you and God bless.